Hi there, John Moore here, and I'm a spiritual teacher. I specialize in shamanism, teaching shamanism. I'm from Maine in the US, and today I want to talk to you about spiritual or psychic self defense and taking a more rational, thoughtful view of that. And I want to give you a little background on me, not too much and not because I particularly enjoy talking about myself, but so that you can understand where I'm coming from. Besides being a trained shamanic teacher and practitioner and having been a very spiritual person my whole life, practiced tantric Buddhism and all of those things, I also happen to have a master's degree in information security and assurance, which includes studying doing risk assessments for networks and computer systems and that sort of thing. And I also have a background in martial arts, and I had a company that I taught self-defense and personal protection and crime prevention for many years in the Boston area. I taught at Harvard Medical School. I taught at in law firms and a shelter for pregnant teenagers, right? And so um, I'm telling you all this because that's kind of a weird intersection of things that gives me some expertise in looking at things like threats and risk and vulnerabilities. And so there are a lot of materials out there on spiritual self-defense, psychic self-defense. And in fact, I have a class coming up, a free one, as a matter of fact, on Learn It Live, on spiritual self-defense and what I call hygiene. And the thing I think that's different about the way that I teach from anything I've read, and I've got whole shelves of books on, this one's called Hex Twisting. It's pretty good on countering spells and that sort of thing. The thing that I think makes my approach different is that I look at things from a risk assessment standpoint, right? And let's talk about risk and what that means and why that gives us sort of a saner framework for looking at anything we do to protect ourselves from harm. Okay, risk is a something you can kind of calculate, and it's based on the likelihood of something bad happening, the potential damage that something bad happening can cause, and the cost to sort of, calculated in with that is sort of the cost of trying to fix that thing after it's happened or trying to protect from it. Let me get into some examples that'll make it a little bit clearer, right? So where I happen to live is not a flood zone. Okay, so I am at low risk, not high risk, not zero risk, but I am at very low risk for flood damage happening to my home. And when I bought the house, they go through the whole thing like, do you need flood insurance, right? Based on where I live and how high it is and the bodies of water and all of those things. And I don't need flood insurance. Okay. So very low probability that a flood is going to happen here. Um, but a flood can cause devastating damage, right? Can cause complete destruction of a structure, or almost total up to total destruction of a structure, so that people at risk of a flood have a very high risk. Probability is high if they live in a flood zone, and the amount of damage that it can cause and the cost to remediate that might be total, right? So that's one way to look at risk. And so we need to intelligently look at risks as best we can. It can be really hard with non-physical, spiritual things, because there can be this false sense of risk around us. Most people don't have people sending hexes and spells at them, but there are people who do. I have had people send hexes and spells, baneful spells towards me. Fairly easy to remediate, usually. But the risk can be high depending on your circumstances. Your personal life circumstances may increase or decrease probability of that happening. And so putting some protections in place, are a good thing. Protection is better than remediation always. However, it can be really, really expensive to protect from certain threats. And expensive doesn't just mean money. It means money, time, attention, anything you have that's a limited resource. Okay, so if a nuclear attack happened close to me, that is a risk of complete total destruction of me. It would probably kill me, wipe out everything I owned, all of those things. Okay, what would it take to protect myself from a nuclear attack? And do I think that a nuclear attack near me is very likely? No, I don't. Protection from a nuclear attack, for example, might involve me building a huge, expensive bunker, and then what? Like, what society am I emerging to after I spend a year in my bunker and the earth around me is radioactive when I emerge, and all of those things, right? So that, I might say, low probability, high damage potential, high potential for loss, very expensive to protect against. So I'm probably not going to do anything about that, right? I'm going to make some choices. So another example is I live in a very low crime area. I live in a rural area. There's hardly any crime here whatsoever. I still lock my doors. And I know I grew up not far from here, and we didn't lock our doors until the day we got burgled. And then we locked our doors from then on out. I know that most burglaries happen through an unlocked door or window, and they happen in the middle of the afternoon. So I'm here in the afternoon. I don't want a burglar to come in. That's sort of a high risk if I'm in the house when a burglar is here. And locking a door takes a second, less than a second. So I lock my doors. I know people who don't, and they're like, "I can't believe you locked your door. How crazy. That's paranoid." It's not paranoid. I did this. I turned my wrist and I locked my door, and that might potentially keep somebody out. A police officer, somebody I knew who used to be a police officer, told me in the decades of experience she had that every car break-in she ever investigated was an unlocked car. So while it's true that there was a period of time in many major cities, for example, where people stealing car stereos were breaking windows to do so, that's not usually how it happens. People usually get into cars because they're left unlocked. It takes less than a second to lock your car and take your keys with you. So again, low cost, maybe so this is the sort of the mental calculus that you can do about things. So let's talk about spiritual protection, spiritual self-defense. There are things that can cause us problems, cause us emotional problems, drain our energy, all of these things. These are sort of low damage risks, but we encounter them all the time. The probability is very high, right? I use the example of walking through the mall or walking through Walmart, and I just feel gross afterwards, right? It's not a lot of damage. It's not causing big problems, but I can do some things. I can practice a shielding exercise. I can do cleansing every now and then, right? And very low cost from a time investment, time and attention investment, mitigate this small risk, small from the perspective of the damage that it can cause, but it's a very high probability risk, right? So is it worth it for me to do that? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes, every single time. On the far side of that, like something that could be much more damaging to your life, but to me is almost infinitesimally small risk, is like attack by spiritual entities, like really powerful spiritual entities. People might say like demons are attacking me. 100% of the people I have encountered that thought they were under attack from demons were experiencing a psychotic break or had some form of psychosis. Let me say up front that I think mental illness that involves psychosis doesn't mean these people aren't perceiving these things. They're very real to them. I think my take is that they're very wide open, and they are, in fact, frequently experiencing real spiritual phenomena, but they are interpreting that as attacks, and they can't turn it off the way that somebody who's, just going through some training, like shamanic training, can like go into the spirit world, look at things, and then come back and turn it off. People who have some sort of psychotic break can't turn that off, and it affects their thinking and their belief system. I'm, under attack by gods and goddesses or demons or whatever. Um, that is so rare in my experience that I've never actually encountered it. I've never encountered it in a way that it is real. 100% of the people who tell me they think they're under demonic attack, when I ask them, they have a diagnosed with some sort of psychological issue. Doesn't mean I won't help them out, but I won't help somebody with a diagnosed condition if they are not being treated, and I need to speak to their professional medical or therapist who will say that what I'm doing with them is safe. I do not want to put people into a worse position, a worse state. So, very, very rare. I have encountered people with possessing beings in a couple of different situations. These are not very powerful beings, but they can cause problems. They can cause health problems, emotional problems, psychological problems, problems with the way you're thinking. They can drain your energy. They can cause bad luck and incidents that lead to injury. So very high impact, but low probability usually, unless you're doing certain things. Couple of times I've encountered people who had these, like lots of possessing beings around them to the point that it was, really affecting their perceptions and their ability to deal in the world. And I'll talk about something else in a second, but one was somebody who had done every psychedelic drug under the sun multiple times, many times, was telling me stories about it. As I was talking to this gentleman, I could see and hear little beings just zipping around him, and he couldn't make, good focus with his eyes, and there was all kinds of stuff going on with him. And he's like, yeah, I've done psilocybin and ayahuasca and peyote and bufo. And so, well, I don't put plant medicine down, and I think it has its place in culturally appropriate ceremony. I think there are people out there who are just blowing their doors wide open and don't know how to close them, and doing it somewhat irresponsibly. So that's a risk, right? How do you mitigate that risk? Well, you do things in more of a sane way. How do you fix it if you've let you've blown the barn doors open and the animals are roaming around in the yard and the wolf is inside the barn? Lots and lots of work. Very expensive to clean up. So a little bit of protection up front by making wiser choices. Another person I ran into, I didn't have a long conversation with this person or anything, but this was in we'll say in a occult shop in Salem, Massachusetts. And I was in there with my girlfriend, and she was looking at something high up on the wall, and this guy walked by and was staring at the floor, and as he passed by, like really quickly passed by, said, I've got another one of those in the back, and like just zoomed into the back and came out with another thing, and didn't make eye contact the entire time. He wasn't looking through his own eyes, we'll put it that way. And she was kind of like, oh, what's going on with that guy? He's kind of freaking me out. Like, his behavior is really weird, and how did he know what I was looking at while he was staring, his physical eyes are staring at the floor. And I said, he's not looking through his own eyes. He's looking through the eyes of a being that has kind of taken over for him. My guess, my somewhat educated guess, is that this guy was doing a lot of occult work that he was not properly banishing, closing down, having protection in place. and he had opened himself up to to a being kind of taking over. Now, uh, that could be taken care of if he wanted to. Why would somebody not want to? Well, frequently these beings, these entities, whatever you want to call them, they create these symbiotic relationships, right? They feed usually off like our emotional energy, and what they can give us back sometimes are psychic abilities. So somebody's like super clairvoyant, like this guy staring at the ground and knowing what somebody is looking at that is high above them that they're not even touching, and there's like, this is one of those stores where the walls, the floors, the shelves are just covered with stuff everywhere, and he knew exactly what she was looking at, knew exactly where it was in the back and when it got it. um like there's some clairvoyant ability there. And so people sometimes, create these relationships with these beings unconsciously or consciously. And whatever the issue is, again, it's like having a parasite. It's gonna, potentially cause health problems, mental health problems, gonna be draining away your energy. If it's something that feeds off your fear or anger, it's going to try to get your fear and anger stirred up, right? So that's a problem. So, from my view, we really want to be standing in our own, what we call spiritual sovereignty, right? Standing in our own power. If we want to develop clairvoyant abilities, we'll work on that. If we want to develop other abilities, we work on that within ourselves, right? And again, I'm not saying don't work with spiritual entities, but understand how to banish, understand how to cast a circle, all of those things. Learn what you're doing. So that's the cost of protection. Learn what you're doing and learn how to protect yourself and put protection in place for yourself. Because the cost of cleanup would probably be very high. It would probably take a long time. He'd probably have to seek out professional help. He'd probably have to pay somebody to work with him, whether that person was a practitioner of voodoo or shamanism or Wicca or something else. Would have to do some ritual and ceremonial work probably to separate that out. It might be a painful process for the person going through the what we call depossession. So there you have it. So um, the risk was higher for these people because they were doing things, in my opinion, in unsafe ways, um, doing things that could be done safely, right? Somebody could be, you can evoke and invoke things without having them permanently attached to you. You can use plant medicine in ceremony without just completely overdoing it, and going to practitioners who don't know what they're doing. Or I don't know what this person's story was, but he was going from basically from drug to drug to drug to drug, trying to have some kind of, and having these profound experiences but not integrating any of them and not doing work to close them down. There are a lot of practitioners out there these days that, because there's now money, a lot of money, in things like ayahuasca and psilocybin and that kind of thing, there are a lot of, sort of quacks out there who don't know what they're doing. And how do you know if somebody knows what they're doing or not? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I would be really, really cautious about using entheogens, and using them in a sacred way and using them as part of ceremony, and not just using them to like get high or have a trippy experience. Like know what you're doing before you do it. Know that you can, figure out if you can trust the person who's administering it or not, and administering the ceremony. There have been lots of problems. Okay, so looking at all of these things from a risk analysis perspective, there are things that, high probability, high damage, whatever that you want to avoid in the beginning, protect yourself from, and know how to potentially clean up. And there are things that are um, lower risk from the perspective that the damage they're going to cause is very small, but high probability, and that are very, very easy to protect from, right? So doing cleansings, very simple, take a salt bath or salt scrub in the shower to get energy off of you, shield yourself, learn how to do psychic shielding when you go into places with lots of heavy emotional energy that you don't want to pick up on yourself. I hope that's helpful. There'll be much more to come on this topic as I dive into it deeper and deeper, and I will talk to you very soon.